It's not like how you see it in the movies. There wasn't one defining moment where everything fell apart. No grand, dramatic unveiling. Instead, it all started subtly, small things that you initially try to brush off because you don't want to come across as paranoid. But damn, those little things accumulate over time. Before you know it, the woman you married feels more like a stranger sharing your home. That's precisely how it unfolded for me with Mira. The first crack appeared when she was packing for a work trip. Mira stood by the bed, hurriedly tossing clothes into her suitcase as if she were racing against the clock, her back turned to me the whole time. At first I thought nothing of it, she traveled for work frequently enough. But this time felt different. I caught sight of her outfits, short dresses and revealing tops. They looked great on her, I won't deny that, but they were not the types of clothes she usually packed for these trips. Then there was the perfume, the one I gifted her for our anniversary last year. It was ridiculously expensive and something she reserved for special occasions, typically for me. "Do you really need all that for a work thing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't turn to face me. "It's just a few dinners with clients. You know how it goes." Except I didn't really know, not like this. I wasn't oblivious. Something felt off. What kind of client dinner requires lingerie and perfume that practically screams, "Come sleep with me"? And then I spotted the necklace, the one I had given her on our last anniversary. A simple gold chain adorned with a tiny heart pendant. She tossed it into her suitcase as if it were an afterthought, like she recognized she had to bring it but wished she didn't have to. That hit harder than I expected. It felt less like a sentimental gesture and more like ticking off a box. "Do you need any help?" I ventured, hoping to catch her eye. "No, I'm fine," she replied, zipping the suitcase shut and walking out of the room before I could get another word in. Our relationship had been rocky for weeks, and this trip felt like another nail in the coffin. We were bickering over trivial things, whether I was contributing enough around the house, why she seemed so distracted, or if I'd forgotten to pick up the dry cleaning. It looked like normal couple stuff on the surface, but beneath it all, it felt like we were disintegrating piece by piece. It wasn't just the arguments either. Mira had been pulling away from me in ways that were impossible to ignore. She started coming home later than usual, always with the same excuse. "Work's been crazy." And when she did arrive home, she seemed utterly drained, collapsing onto the couch with her phone glued to her hand. I'd ask about her day, and she'd mumble vague answers, as if I were just a coworker she had to indulge instead of the man she had vowed to spend her life with. The worst part? The intimacy had vanished. I mean, completely vanished. It wasn't merely that we weren't having sex. It was how she avoided any physical closeness. Dodging kisses, brushing off hugs. Whenever I tried to initiate something, she would tense up or claim to be tired. Once, after a nice dinner, when I tried to make a move, she shot me this look, half irritation, half pity, and said, "Landon, not now, okay? I have an early day tomorrow." I stood there feeling like a pathetic loser who had asked a girl to dance and got shot down in front of the entire school. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, contemplating where everything had gone wrong. I thought back to the early days when just seeing her would fill me with warmth. We used to share laughter constantly, touch each other effortlessly, as if we could never get enough. But now? Now it felt like I was cohabitating with a polite stranger. A few nights later, I met Jared at our usual bar. Jared had been my friend since college. He was the kind of guy you could confide in about anything without feeling judged. We were playing pool, downing whiskey shots, and I figured it was time to unload some of my burdens. "She's been acting strange, man," I said, lining up for a shot. Distant, but not in the usual "I'm busy" way. I mean really distant. Jared chalked his cue and looked at me. "Rough patches happen, dude. Maybe she's just stressed out from work." "Yeah, but she changed her phone password," I added, sinking the 8-ball. That made him pause. "Did she tell you why?" "Nope." He didn't speak for a moment, just took a long drink. "Look, marriages go through tough times. I'm not suggesting anything is happening, but that's not exactly a reassuring sign, man." And therein lay the issue. Jared wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. If he was hesitating, I knew I wasn't just imagining things. When I returned home that night, Mira was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I lay next to her, staring at the curve of her back and the way her hair fanned out across the pillow. I longed to reach out, to touch her, to establish some connection, but the distance between us felt like miles. The following morning she departed early for her trip, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading out the door. It felt more like the kiss you'd give a relative at Thanksgiving, not the kind reserved for your husband. I watched her walk away, and something inside me knew that when she returned, nothing would be the same. Not that it was particularly stable before. All day I replayed moments in my mind, searching for signs I might have overlooked. The time she canceled plans at the last minute. The nights she wouldn't answer her phone, only to later claim she was too tired to respond. It's easy to dismiss those kinds of things when you trust someone, but once doubt creeps in, it gnaws at you. I kept telling myself I'd confront her when she got back, but deep down I already understood. Something was irrevocably broken, and there was no way to fix it. It happened by chance, like a punch you never see coming. One morning I grabbed our shared tablet, same as always, just planning to skim the news over my coffee. I wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary. In fact, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. But when the screen lit up, I noticed something odd. The tablet had synced with Myra's phone. Her messages, photos, and emails all laid out in plain sight. At first, I had no intention of snooping. I swear. But then a notification for a hotel bill caught my eye, and my stomach dropped as I opened the email. This wasn't just any bill. It detailed a dinner for two, complete with champagne, dessert, and fancy cocktails. My hands began to tremble. As I scrolled down, I saw the hotel name, a luxurious 5-star establishment downtown. Attached to the receipt was a note that read, "Thank you for choosing us for your romantic getaway." Romantic getaway? What the hell? I wish I could say I slammed the tablet shut and walked away, but I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it. My fingers hovered over her synced photo gallery, and when I opened it, I felt my entire world collapse. There they were, selfies of Mira in lingerie I had never seen before. Sexy, revealing poses she never took for me. Instantly, I realized those images weren't meant for my eyes. My chest tightened and it felt like I was suffocating. I kept scrolling through the gallery, hoping for some explanation, a reason that would help make sense of all this. But with every swipe, the situation only worsened. The angles, the way she posed, the way she smiled, it was evident this was for someone else. Someone who wasn't me. I called her right away. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I must have tried at least a dozen times, pacing around the kitchen like a trapped animal. When she finally texted me back, all she wrote was, "Busy with work. Can't talk now." That was it. No apology for missing my calls, no explanation, nothing. Just more bullshit. I slumped at the table, the tablet still open before me, struggling to keep my composure. But the anger simmered inside me, a deep, ugly rage that threatened to consume me. I returned to the photos, scrolling through them repeatedly, as if seeing them one more time might dull the pain. It didn't. It only made me feel more nauseous. Next, I checked her messages. I don't know why I put myself through that. Maybe I thought if I had the full picture it would somehow lessen the hurt. Instead, it felt like being stabbed over and over again. One name kept popping up, Gavin. Some guy I didn't know, someone who had never come up in our conversations. The messages were short, but they were enough to obliterate any hope I had left. Flirty texts, inside jokes, mentions of drinks, late-night plans, and hotel rooms. And then the one message that confirmed my worst fears. "Can't wait to see you again. Same room as last time." I just sat there staring at the screen, my head pounding and heart racing. That was it. My worst fear laid out in black and white. She wasn't just cheating. She was making plans to see him again. I thought I'd feel fury, but in that moment all I felt was numbness. Cold, dead numbness. It was as if part of me had known this was coming, and the rest had finally caught up. For a while I remained in the kitchen's silence, clutching the tablet, fighting back tears that burned behind my eyes. I didn't cry often, hell I couldn't even recall the last time I had. But this was different. This was not just betrayal. It was the death of everything I thought we shared. Every kiss, every memory, every promise felt like a complete and utter lie. I kept staring at her texts with Gavin, my mind spiraling with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just him or were there others? When had she stopped loving me, if she ever truly did? The most painful realization was that she had never even given me a chance to fight for us. She had simply checked out, found someone else, and left me in the dark. The tablet buzzed in my hand. A new message from Mira. We'll talk when I get back. Okay? Don't stress. Don't stress. I nearly laughed at how utterly absurd that was. Don't stress? After everything I had just uncovered? She didn't even bother to deny it. No attempt to explain herself, no panic, no remorse. Just a half-hearted text telling me not to worry, as if I were some fool who would wait patiently for her return from another man's bed. I set the tablet down, my hands trembling with a rage I didn't know I possessed. Every part of me wanted to smash it against the wall, to scream, to throw something, anything. But I didn't. I just sat there, my heart racing in my chest, trying to process the reality that the woman I had built my life around, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was nothing more than a damned liar. Eventually I stood up, pacing the house as I tried to figure out what to do next. Should I confront her now? Call her and let her hear the anger lacing my voice? Or should I wait for her to come home and look me in the eye, so I could witness her squirm under the weight of her lies? One thing was certain. There was no going back from this. Whatever we had was gone. She had killed it the moment she sent those pictures, the moment she decided someone else mattered more than the life we had built together. The scariest part wasn't the thought of losing her. It was the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, I had never truly known her at all. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, replaying every single moment we had shared, desperately searching for any signs I must have missed. The more I thought about it, the more everything fell into place. The late nights, the last-minute cancellations, the growing chill between us. I had tried to tell myself it was just a rough patch, that we would push through it. But now I knew better. There was no fixing this. It was irreparable. I poured myself a drink, slumped onto the couch, and cast one more glance at the tablet. The messages with Gavin remained open, taunting me, challenging me to take action. My fists clenched at the thought of that arrogant jerk, knowing he had been with my wife, while I waited at home like a fool for her to return. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. I wasn't about to back down without a fight. The next morning I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. Not from drinking, but from the emotional whirlwind that had consumed me all night. My eyes felt raw, my chest constricted, and every breath was a struggle. I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer, so I called Jared. If there was anyone who would give it to me straight, no sugarcoating, it was him. We agreed to meet at our usual bar, and I threw on the first clothes I found, not caring in the slightest how I looked. When I walked in, Jared was already at our usual table, nursing a beer. The moment he caught sight of my face, his expression shifted to one of concern mixed with curiosity, as if he sensed something monumental had happened. I skipped the pleasantries and slid the tablet across the table, watching as his eyes scanned the screen. "Jesus, man," he said, swiping through the photos and reading the messages. "This is bad." He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. Jared wasn't one to easily flinch, but the disbelief was palpable on his face. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the walls closing in. "What do I do, Jared? Just walk away? Let her off the hook?" He let out a heavy sigh and set the tablet down. "You've got two choices, Landon. One, you can walk away. Get a lawyer, cut your losses, and move on. It'll hurt like hell, but at least you'll keep your dignity." I shook my head vehemently. "That's not enough. Not after what she's done." Jared regarded me with a knowing look. "Then there's option 2. You hurt her back. Strike where it hurts the most. Make her feel everything you're feeling right now." I stared at him, my mind swirling. Part of me wanted to take the high road, to walk away and let karma take its course. But the other part, the part that had spent hours fixating on those photos, reliving each lie, wanted vengeance. I wasn't proud of that part, but it was there, gnawing at me, demanding to be heard. After what felt like an eternity, I made my decision. "I want her to feel it," I said quietly, my voice steely. "I want her to understand exactly what this feels like." Jared nodded, as if he had anticipated my answer all along. "Then you know what you need to do." On the drive home, a plan began to form in my mind, something dark, something deliberate. I wasn't just going to confront her. That would be too straightforward. No, I wanted her to experience the pain, to live through the same gut-wrenching betrayal I felt. And I knew exactly who I could use to make that happen. Clara Benson. Clara had been Myra's friend for years, though their relationship had frayed recently. Clara had always flirted with me. Innocent enough when Mira wasn't around, but now those moments felt like an opening. I didn't need to convince myself that Clara would be eager to help. She had always harbored an attraction to me, and I was ready to take advantage of it, just for one night. I dug through my contacts and shot her a text. "Hey Clara. Been thinking about you. Wanna grab dinner sometime?" It didn't take long for her to respond. "I thought you'd never ask. When?" I couldn't help but smirk, though it wasn't a happy one. "How about tomorrow night? My place." Her reply came almost instantly. "I'm in. Can't wait." With that, the gears were in motion. I had no intention of backing out now. The following day, I spent hours transforming the house. I bought dozens of candles and fresh flowers, turning the space into something that looked like it belonged in a romantic film. I set the table with our finest dishes, poured wine, and dimmed the lights just enough to create an intimate ambience. To an outsider, it seemed like a setup for reconciliation, a man trying to win back his wife. But deep down, I was crafting a scene for her worst nightmare. I went upstairs to the bedroom, double-checking everything. The bed was neatly made, the sheets crisp and fresh, and the room smelled of lavender, the scent Mira adored. I placed a couple of wine glasses on the nightstand for effect, and I dimmed the lights in there as well. Everything was part of a carefully orchestrated act. By the time I was finished, the house was immaculate. I stood in the living room surveying my work and felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I knew this was going to hurt her, but instead of feeling guilty, I felt a surge of control. For the first time since I discovered those messages, I felt like I had the upper hand. As I stood there, I couldn't help but think about the irony of it all. I was about to use romance, something that should be sacred in a marriage, as a weapon. I didn't just want to hurt Mira. I wanted to shatter her the way she had shattered me. Tomorrow night, Clara would come over, and everything would fall into place. Mira wouldn't see it coming, and when she finally did, it would be far too late. Mira came through the door late that night, dragging her suitcase behind her. I heard her fumble with the keys, and when she finally stepped inside, she looked exhausted. That was the first word that came to mind as Mira walked through the door. Sure, she looked drained, but it was the kind of exhaustion that comes from indulging a little too much, not from a long, grueling day at work. Her eyes were glazed, her hair slightly disheveled, and there was a loose, carefree ease to her movements. If I hadn't known better, I might have thought she was just thrilled to be home. But I did know better. "Hey there," I greeted, meeting her at the door with a warm smile, a glass of wine already in hand. "You look like you could use this." She blinked, surprise flickering across her face at my unexpected warmth. She clearly hadn't anticipated this, not after the tension that had hung between us before her departure. But I could see the relief in her eyes, that fleeting hope that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't discovered her secret. Maybe everything was still fine. "Thanks," she replied, accepting the wine and taking a slow sip. "I missed you." I smiled back, though the words churned my stomach. "I bet you did," I thought bitterly, but I kept my face neutral. I maintained the illusion, pretending everything was just as it should be. "I missed you too," I replied softly, the lie slipping easily off my tongue. She flashed me a small smile, and for a moment, it almost felt like the good old days. Almost. I noticed her relaxing, the tension in her shoulders dissipating as she kicked off her shoes and dropped her suitcase by the door. Whatever guilt she might have felt was fading quickly, replaced by the comfort of thinking she'd managed to pull off her little charade. "Dinner's ready," I said, gesturing toward the dining room. "Thought we could have a little date night, just the two of us." Her face lit up with genuine surprise, which only fueled my anger further. How effortlessly she slipped back into her role as the devoted wife after spending nights in someone else's arms. But I kept my cool. Tonight wasn't about my rage. It was about her, and ensuring she felt every ounce of the betrayal I had been holding inside. At the table, I poured her another glass of wine and served the meal I'd prepared earlier. I kept the conversation light, asking her about her trip and feigning interest in her answers. She talked about meetings and presentations, weaving a narrative like a skilled actress, and I nodded along as if every word made sense. "So, how were those client dinners?" I asked, swirling the wine in my glass. She hesitated for the briefest moment, just long enough for me to catch it. "They were good. Productive," she answered. "Good," I said, forcing a warm smile. I'm glad to hear that. She scrutinized me for a moment, as if trying to figure out what had changed. I could see her mind working, but any doubts she had were quickly buried under the illusion I had created. By the time we finished eating, she was completely at ease, even leaning across the table to brush my hand with hers, acting as if everything between us was finally back to normal. It was almost laughable, how easy it was to lull her into this false sense of security. She thought she was safe. She thought we were fine again. But the night was far from over. After dinner I stood up and took her hand. Come on, I said with a lightness that belied my true feelings. Let's head upstairs. She smiled, pleasantly surprised. You sure? You're not tired? Not at all, I replied, keeping my tone upbeat. I've been looking forward to this. As we made our way upstairs, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. In her mind, this was the start of our reconciliation. A new beginning. I could almost hear her thoughts whispering, maybe we can go back to how it used to be. When we reached the bedroom door, I let her go ahead. After you, I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Mira opened the door and froze. There, lounging comfortably in the middle of our bed, was Clara. She was clad in nothing but a silk robe, her legs stretched out, and a smug smile danced on her lips. Hey Mira, Clara called sweetly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Miss me? I watched as the color drained from Myra's face, realization washing over her in waves. It was almost poetic, the way her expression morphed from confusion to shock and finally to pure horror. What the? Mira stuttered, her eyes darting between me and Clara. What the hell is going on? I crossed my arms, savoring the moment more than I should have. Now you know how it feels, I said, my voice steady and calm. Her gaze locked onto mine, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing as if she was struggling to find the words. Landon. What the hell is this? I offered her a cold smile. What's the matter, Mira? I thought you enjoyed surprises. Clara let out a soft laugh, shifting her position on the bed, clearly relishing Myra's shock. You're insane, Mira spat, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. You brought her into our bed? Into your bed? I retorted, raising an eyebrow. Funny. I thought this bed lost its significance the moment you decided to share yourself with Gavin. Her eyes widened in fear, and for a brief instant, I saw genuine terror flicker across her face. That's when it clicked, she knew. She realized I had uncovered everything. I can explain, she started, her voice trembling, but I held up a hand to silence her. Don't, I said flatly. I've heard enough lies. Mira looked between me and Clara, her hands trembling at her sides. Landon, please. This isn't what it looks like. Save it, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. This is exactly what it looks like. Now you get to experience what betrayal feels like. Clara slowly stood up, stretching her arms above her head, clearly in no rush to leave. Well, this was fun, she remarked with a smirk, collecting her clothes from the floor. Thanks for the invite. I didn't say a word as she strolled past Mira, brushing against her shoulder like it was nothing. The expression on Myra's face was priceless, an exquisite mix of devastation and disbelief. Once Clara had exited, Mira spun around to face me, her anger finally spilling over. You bastard, she spat. How could you do this to me? I tilted my head slightly, mimicking the look she had often given me in the past. How could I? How could you? She stood there, breathing heavily, fists clenched, tears welling in her eyes. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not anymore. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, observing her as she crumbled under the weight of her own guilt. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Myra's face twisted with rage, and the silence between us shattered like fragile glass. She erupted into a tirade, her voice raw and jagged, slicing through the air. You fucking asshole! She screamed, fists balled up. How dare you bring that woman into our bed? How dare you? I stood there, unruffled, arms crossed, watching her come undone. It felt surreal to witness her like this, like I had peeled back the layers and exposed her true self. The rage, the panic, the betrayal etched on her features. The irony of it all was almost laughable. You did this to me? She shouted, her voice cracking, desperation seeping in as she tried to reverse the knife's thrust. After everything you do this? I leaned casually against the wall, giving her the coldest stare I could muster. Now you know how it feels, I replied, my voice unwavering. That hit her like a brick wall. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to protest, but no words came. I could see the moment it sank in, the weight of her actions now staring her down. She staggered back a step, as if I had physically struck her, her whole body trembling, her complexion draining of color. You don't understand, Landon, she stuttered, her fury melting into something resembling pleading. It wasn't what you think. I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake. Just one stupid drunken night. She was grasping at straws, throwing out whatever she thought might save her. Her words spilled out in a messy, desperate flow, each one reeking of desperation. I didn't want to hurt you, she continued, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. It was never meant to be serious. It just happened. I was drunk and I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't even know what I was doing.
I stared daher, unblinking.
Her excuses sounded like white noise in the background, an irritating murmur I had no interest in hearing. She sounded like a teenager trying to explain why she was out past curfew, not a woman trying to justify a betrayal that shattered our marriage. You didn't mean for it to happen? I echoed, my voice thick with disbelief. So what? Gavin just accidentally ended up between your legs. Her face flushed with shame, and she turned her gaze downward, unable to meet my eyes. I swear, Landon, she whispered, tears flowing freely now. It didn't mean anything. I was confused, lonely. We were in such a bad place and I... Stop, I interrupted, my voice as cold as ice. Just stop. She looked at me with wide, desperate eyes, as if hoping for a flicker of forgiveness. But I felt no pity. Not a shred. Before she could continue, Clara stirred from the bed, stretching leisurely, completely unfazed by the chaos unfolding around her. Well, Clara said, her tone casual as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed. That was entertaining. Mira shot a venomous glare at her. Get the hell out of my house. Clara took her time dressing, savoring the moment as if it were a fine wine. She adjusted her robe, tying it loosely around her waist, and stood up, completely unhurried. Relax, Mira, Clara said with a smug grin. I was just doing what you couldn't. Keeping your husband company. I didn't say a word. I simply stood there taking in the scene, knowing this was precisely the outcome I had orchestrated. Clara shot me a wink as she made her way toward the door. As she passed Mira, she leaned in just enough to whisper loud enough for me to hear. Guess what, Mira? He's not even that great of a husband. Mira remained frozen, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. But she didn't respond, not to Clara, not to me. She just stood there, utterly devastated, broken in a way I recognized all too well. Clara stepped toward the door, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She glanced back one last time, offering me a satisfied smile. Thanks for the invite, Landon, she said with a wink. I nodded in response, and with that she was gone, leaving Mira and me alone in the aftermath of our shattered reality. The instant the door clicked shut, Mira swung back toward me, her face a chaotic blend of anger, shame, and disbelief. Her breath hitched, and I could see the cracks widening in her carefully constructed facade. How could you do this to me? She whispered, her voice hollow, as if my betrayal had carved something vital out of her. I let the silence linger, heavy and suffocating, before finally responding. How could I not? The morning after everything collapsed, I woke up before dawn, lying in a bed that felt unnaturally cold. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, contemplating what had to happen next. There was no going back. Whatever remained between Mira and me was beyond repair, and I had no intention of sticking around and pretending otherwise. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and made my way downstairs. The atmosphere in the house felt thick, like the aftermath of a violent storm. I spotted her suitcase where she had left it by the door and carried it into the kitchen. Opening it, I began to pack her clothes methodically, deliberately. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage from the previous night had burned out, leaving only an unsettling clarity. I was finished. By the time the sun began to rise, her suitcase was packed, zipped up, and neatly positioned by the front door. I brewed a pot of coffee, pouring myself a mug and taking a moment to relish the silence. Then I sat down at the table and waited. It wasn't long before I heard her tentative footsteps on the stairs. She likely thought we would talk things over, that I would still be seething but open to her charm. I could almost envision the carefully rehearsed speech she had practiced in her mind all night. Mira stepped into the room slowly, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "Landon," she began, her voice so fragile it felt like it might shatter at any moment. I cut her off before she could finish. "Your suitcase is by the door," I said, pointing to it. "I've already packed your things." She blinked in confusion, struggling to grasp what was happening. What do you mean?" "I filed for divorce this morning," I said, my tone flat and resolute. "It's over, Mira." Her face crumpled, and the impact of my words hit her like a freight train. "No, Landon, please. Don't do this. We can work through this. We can fix it." I shook my head slowly. "No, we can't. It's too late." She rushed toward me, grabbing my arms, tears cascading down her cheeks. "Please, Landon, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I'll do anything to make it right. Just don't leave me." Her desperate pleas were filled with hollow promises. I looked at her, seeing her for what she truly was. Not the woman I had once loved, but a stranger who had dismantled everything we had built together. "It's too late," I reiterated, my voice cold and unwavering. She sobbed harder, clinging to me like a lifeline, but I remained steadfast. There was no room left for forgiveness, no second chances, no way back. I gently peeled her hands away from my arms and took a step back. "You need to leave." Her face twisted in agony, but she understood there was nothing left to say. She turned toward the door, dragging her suitcase behind her with shaking hands. For a brief moment she hesitated, as if hoping I might call her back, offer one last chance to make things right. But I stood there, silent, watching as she opened the door and stepped out into the morning light. And just like that she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening yet oddly liberating. It felt like relief, like I could finally take a deep breath after being underwater for far too long. I poured myself another cup of coffee and took it out to the terrace, the cool morning breeze washing over me. The sky transformed into a palette of soft pinks and oranges as the sun broke the horizon, spilling warmth into the world. I settled into my usual chair, cradling the warm mug between my hands, watching the day unfold. For the first time in what felt like ages, a sense of peace enveloped me. The pain still lingered, the sting of betrayal echoing in my mind, but it no longer consumed me. I knew it would take time to heal, but I was finally free. No more lies. No more games. No more pretense. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate, and that was enough. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment, and let the past dissolve with the rising sun. Whatever came next, I would confront it head-on without fear or regret. And this time I would do it on my own.